Hi everyone, welcome back to Bite Marks. I'm Emilio, pronouns he, him, and joining me today for the start of what I hope will be a very short but very cool series is Robin. Say hello, Robin. Or Robsy.
Hi- Hello, how are you guys doing today? Hope well. Thank you for having me, Emilio.
Yeah, Robin, why don't you tell the audience about yourself and maybe they can guess why you're actually here.
Sure thing. So, I am a content creator. I'm very passionate about my Instagram and my TikTok pages. I mostly base it on Marvel fandom, and I really love the Marvel universe, but it's debatable when it comes to Disney. But now that Disney's bought the rights, I actually kind of like that a lot. And I am a huge fan of Spider-Man No Way Home. I've been making so many edits with Andrew Garfield, Tobey Maguire, and Tom Holland. And I've seen the movie 6 times in different types of viewing, like 40x, 3DX, 2D, 2D VIP, and counting. So I actually have 6 Mueller tickets, and I might be able to go see it 2 more times in 2D.
Yeah, you are
Right.
basically a Spider-Man super fan TikToker.
Yes.
Is the way that I would describe it. Now,
Yeah.
for viewers at home who don't know, I'm also quite a big fan of Spider-Man. I don't necessarily advertise it as much, and I certainly haven't seen No Way Home 6 times. But I do think it is a really interesting property, and I've been wanting to talk about Spider-Man for a very long time. So we are actually going to be doing, you and I and Callum, who will be joining us in subsequent episodes, a short series about Spider-Man where we talk about basically the franchise. We give some different perspectives on it. We do maybe one or two sort of controversial opinions. I think I know that one of our later episodes will be talking about whether or not Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man is much maligned or if he's actually highly underrated. That's definitely going to happen in the future. But I thought today we would actually start with basically two things. Firstly, why do we like Spider-Man? What does Spider-Man mean to us? You and I. And I think also talk about No Way Home and kind of just give a sort of a review, but also just a discussion of the latest and greatest, some would say, Spider-Man movie. How does that sound?
That sounds good. I,
So,
I just want to double check. So, spoiler filled or spoiler free?
right. So, this will be, thank you for reminding me, this will be a spoiler heavy episode. I think the entire series will be a spoiler heavy episode. So, spoilers for basically all the Spider Man movies, maybe some of the Spider Man video games. Basically, if it has Spider Man, you can assume there are going to be spoilers. I would highly recommend that you go watch, if you haven't seen it already, No Way Home. And then you can come back and listen to all of this.
Okay, awesome. I
Right.
just needed to check. I
So,
feel more comfortable now that it's spoiler heavy and not free.
yeah, it's very hard to talk about this stuff, I think, in terms of avoiding spoilers. So why don't we start with
Yes.
you? Why did you go and see Spider-Man No Way Home 6 times? And why are you so into Spider-Man exactly?
All right. Let's swap that around. Let's first go into why I love Spider-Man. Um, I think he's been my favorite character. Even though I saw X-Men first as a kid, I've seen Tobey Maguire's trilogy when I was small. So it came out, I think 2003 or 2002, and I was around 13 or
Hmm.
14, and it was just amazing growing up to that. And then years have passed, and then Amazing Spider-Man was introduced. I didn't think much of the first one, but when I saw the second one, I saw it 12 times consecutively on circuit
Oh,
within a week.
that's
And
crazy. I mean, crazy in a wow. Okay, you are really a super
in
fan.
a good way. So what's sad about that though is I watched Gwen die 12 times over, and it sort of like triggered me to become emotional whenever I see
Hmm.
that scene. So now I loved Andrew Garfield as Spider-Man. For some reason, I think I love his goofiness, like his awkwardness. I see Toby as meme gold. He's awesome. Like, we grew up with it. Like, it's the OG Spider-Man. But for some reason, I'm more I guess attracted, or I'm more connected to you know what? I think it's also about his experiences in Amazing Spider-Man. So then there's also games, there was animated series, everything. I grew up with Spider-Man and I just really enjoyed it. And then Tom Holland's Spider-Man came along and I was a bit conflicted about that because they cancelled Amazing Spider-Man 3 and I felt like Andrew's trilogy was seriously not completed and it was unfinished, so how can I enjoy this new Spider-Man? So okay. So now we'll go on to No Way Home of why I really like it. So this redeemed Tom Holland's role as Spider-Man because this is his trilogy and you got to see him in Infinity War and at the end of Endgame, and I just really grew attached to his character, and it was just so good to be able to see those other two characters and just relive your childhood and early 20s, to be able to enjoy it. Sorry, I'm like in my early 30s, so I'm just like speaking from my perspective, like as a teenager in early 20s, like it's really enjoyable. And it's not only that I go for the audience hype. I just love when everybody cheers when they get to see them on screen. And that's why I also enjoy going with people who haven't seen it before. I don't spoil it for anyone, not at all. This is actually the first time that I'm verbally spoiling it. Aside from that, I've been quiet this entire time. I've not told anybody until now that Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield are in the film. It's really, really awesome.
Yeah, it feels good to just get. It's like a secret, that you have. But
yes.
Yeah, no, I get that. For me, I think a lot of people our age, or just about our age, for them, they knew a world before superhero movies were prevalent, popular, and, to be honest, kind of good. If you're slightly older, so if you're like in your 40s and above, then you grew up essentially in a Wild West era of superhero movies, where for the most part, the most popular superhero movies fixated around Batman and Superman, right? I think a lot of people remember Christopher Reeve's Superman in a very positive light, and to, more or less good or bad receptions, there were early attempts at making, Batman movies. However, for a lot of people, Spider-Man, I think the first one came out in 2002, right? Early 2000. Yeah. That movie was the first time they saw a superhero movie that was sort of the effects budget and like the general presentation was there to actually convince you that there was a real deal kind of thing going on, that an actual superhero was coming to life essentially on the screen. And for me, I have very fond memories of that original Spider-Man movie because I think it opened up in my mind a possibility that comic book movies could be made for people who were either casual fans of comics or not fans of comics at all. Like if you weren't a fan, if you've never read even a single Spider-Man comic, before watching that original Spider-Man, and you watched that movie, I highly think you would become a fan of Spider-Man. And that was not something that I would really get from the other, Batman movies, especially not the Superman movies. It always felt like those movies were very, adult, in their presentations. Whereas Tobey Maguire's first debut as Spider-Man is a very, almost, not childlike, but almost like, like an early kind of teenager projecting into what a superhero would be, right? Peter Parker has very different, very relatable problems and issues and a life. He's doing, I think in the first movie he's doing the high school thing, and then he just sort of ramps up, and so for me, Spider-Man was definitely the kind of movie that made me realize that, hey, I could get into superhero movies and I could find them to be incredibly deep, but also I could find them to be incredibly goofy, and they could strike a line between those two things, you know? Where you have
Yes.
a villain who is as menacing as the Green Goblin, but then you have a sort of this almost comedic surrounding of that, you know, where in the first Spider-Man movie, he fights Bonesaw in a cage.
Again,
He fights Bonesaw in a cage. You know, he has that
Oh,
wrestling.
yes.
And I remember laughing at that.
That's true.
Yeah, it's so
That was
ridiculous.
silly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's ridiculous in a way that's like only a comic book I think could, you know, get away with doing something like that. And then obviously I think for a lot of people, Spider-Man actually opened up the possibility for something like, you know, there were superhero movies before the first Spider-Man movie, but I really feel like if you want to trace the root of the genesis, really, of what I would consider to be the modern superhero movie, then really there are only two movies that come to mind. The first is The Dark Knight, right? Christopher Nolan reinvigorated the superhero franchise, but he did it very specifically for Batman, right? But the seeds of the Marvel universe, I think, really have to lay with Spider-Man. And so Spider-Man is a very important franchise for a lot of reasons, you know. I just think it's cool. Also, Peter Parker is kind of a dork. He's kind of a nerd. He's not like this cool billionaire, you know, handsome, suave guy like Bruce Wayne, or some like hyper perfect sort of masculine dude like Clark Kent. You know, he's a goober. The appeal, I think, of a lot of Spider-Man is that you could really imagine that anyone could be Spider-Man, isn't it?
Yes. What happened in an event was Andrew Garfield dressed up as Spider-Man for his first Comic-Con attendance, and he addressed the panel. Well, there wasn't anyone there, but the speaker, the MC, was there, and he's like, "Sorry, I just have one question. I just need to say something now." And then the guy's like, "Okay, but we're gonna take questions later." He's like, I just need to say something." And then he takes it. He was in the Spider-Man costume, and then he takes his mask off, and then he's like, "I've always wanted to come to Comic-Con as a fan, and that's what I decided to do instead of being on the other side, because everybody can relate to Spider-Man. You feel like an outsider, but you always want to help people, and he just gave this amazing speech that Stan Lee said that we're all Spider-Man in our own way, and that was very sweet.
Yeah, I think Spider-Man has the kind of universal appeal that many other superheroes do not. Like Clark Kent, Superman, he's very specific, right? He's very, like, you could argue that, you know, in a lot of ways, Superman is a very specific kind of person, right? Bruce Wayne, he's a billionaire. I don't think most people could really, you know, identify strongly with having that kind of money. You know, the kind of money that it takes to become Batman. But Spider-Man is, at its heart, a character who could be anyone who gets bitten by that radioactive spider. They get their spider powers, and they just try to do the best with what they have, you know?
Exactly.
It's a very relatable thing, and because Spider-Man can be anyone, I think it's much easier for audiences to relate to him. You know, even if you aren't like a young teenager or, you know, even a kid, you can look at a Spider-Man story and you can empathize with it, you know, because maybe you could have, you know, empathize with, oh yeah, I was living in a rubbish apartment, you know, doing like menial jobs and trying to balance like a whole bunch of things, and my life felt kind of chaotic. And you can relate to that, or if that's your life going through, you know, right now. Those are the kinds of things. Spider-Man has always been, despite the fact that he has spider powers, you know, he could stick to walls and shoot webs. He's always been a strangely relatable hero, and that is the power of Spider-Man. And so for me, it is definitely he's definitely a character that I really like. I've engaged with a lot of the Spider-Man media. I've watched the cartoons, I've played the video games, I've watched the movies. I've even read the comics. I've even read like a couple of editions of Spider-Man comics. My favorite Spider-Man is actually the Spider-Man Noir. I actually have read those comics like from back to front, because That's probably my favorite version of Spider-Man that has ever existed. And maybe if there's time later in another episode, we can talk about that. But you've mentioned, of course, No Way Home, and so we have to address the elephant spider in the room. Just off the cuff, what did you think of No Way? In one sentence, was No Way Home the best Spider-Man movie? Yes or no?
Yes, it was.
Ah.
It was brilliant.
Oh yeah. All right. So, do you want to give the audience a quick summary of the story?
All right, but like from start to finish.
Well, just sort of a rough synopsis, so we can ground our axioms a little bit, and then we can expand out of from there.
What's Mysterio's guy's real name again? Not the actor.
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. I think it's Quentin Beck. There we go.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, so it starts off with what happened in Far From Home. At the end, that Quentin Beck framed Peter Parker basically about using those drones on him and just shoot him all. So it was to do with that, and because of that, J. Jonah Jameson revealed the identity of Spider-Man as Peter Parker. So then they realize that they need to go into hiding, but first he meets a really good lawyer, and then he stays at Happy's bachelor area, his pad, and then he realizes that MJ and Ned and himself can't be admitted into MIT, so then he decides to go visit a strange doctor, and he asks the strange doctor really nicely, even though he's not the superior thing, because Wong managed to get that place for 5 years, because Doctor Strange disappeared for 5 years, or he was blipped. He doesn't have hold of the time stone anymore either.
Yeah, so the impetus for the central crux, to really drill it down, the central issue of No Way Home is that Peter Parker's identity is revealed to the world, and the consequences of that happening are so much that it drives him to try to undo that moment. Now, I've seen a lot of people... No, well, he tries to go to Doctor Strange to cast a spell that'll make everyone forget that he's Spider-Man. And I've seen people, say that there are like a million ways Spider-Man could have phrased his request differently. The most popular one is, he should have just made everyone forget about what Mysterio did or was.
Yay! Yeah.
And that would have like solved the problem, because he didn't have to get rid of himself. He just had to get rid of Mysterio, because Mysterio was the guy who, revealed his identity. Of course, if you know, then you know that Mysterio isn't the only person who knows about Spider-Man's identity. The Vulture, Thomas Coombs, I think that's his name, he also knows who Spider-Man's identity is. So it's not like Spider-Man was zero liability, but it is kind of funny to me that he went with this version of a spell. But then again, he probably wasn't thinking straight. Spider-Man is young, and we've all been there. Either you are going through it now, or you are, you're much older, and you remember what it was like, when you were in your early 20s. That are like late teens. Sometimes you just don't think, carefully, and you want the solution quickly, but you don't necessarily think. And so there is this. Obviously, it has to backfire, and there is a terrible backlash when the spell goes awry, and basically, in order to... Well, why don't you explain it?
Say again, for which part?
So the spell goes awry, right? There's a kind of an accident that happens when the spell is being cast, and that's really the setup for the rest of the story.
So, like, some amazing villains reappear, and then Peter Parker has to kind of keep them in the undercraft that Ned really enjoys. It's to keep them in hold, because Doctor Strange eventually reveals that he needs to take them back to their timelines. But Peter wants to save them. So he thinks he can save them all until he's betrayed by one of them, which is Green Goblin. And then, out of nowhere, because Ned just wishes he could see Peter Parker, the other two from the other universes reappear, the other Peters.
Yes.
Which is so cool.
Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire. So they're basically... Yes. Yeah, so there is this spell that gets cast, and the idea is that Peter wants to make everyone who knows who Spider-Man is to forget, but he has a couple of exceptions, and that kind of works the spell, and so it kind of causes this situation where everyone who knows who Spider-Man is Peter Parker, they get brought from the multiverse into the MCU, and that is Dr. Octavius, from the original Spider-Man run. You've got the Green Goblin, played by amazing actor Willem Dafoe. You've got Electro, the Lizard, Sandman. Basically, a whole bunch of people from Spider-Man's previous versions, the Webverse and the Raimiverse, get brought into the MCU, and Peter now has to deal with the situation. He has to deal with these villains, and he has to also deal with the other Spider-Man. Obviously, I think fans were super excited. This was teased for a very long time. A lot of people were teasing the idea that, oh yeah, they're bringing back other Spider-Man characters. They have to bring back Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield. What did you feel about that? Was that like the thing that made the movie?
Okay, it's actually two things. So it's definitely about their reappearance, but it's also seeing the story arc about how Tom Holland's Peter Parker was such a preppy boy in the first movie, and that he had all this character development, and in the third movie he's become a full-grown man, and he just wanted vengeance for what Green Goblin did, but we'll get to that at a point.
Mm-hmm.
I just felt that also made the movie. It wasn't just Andrew and Tobey. They were definitely the cherry on top. They are definitely the reason why I keep going back to watch it. But the storyline is amazing. I loved it.
Yeah, I was very much, I was very much enraptured by this whole idea, this whole premise, because one of the main criticisms that has been levied against the Tom Holland edition of Spider-Man is that a lot of people just call him even in the movie, they call him Tony Stark Jr., they call him Iron Man Jr. And the idea is that Spider-Man has always kind of been a solo hero. He's always kind of been by himself.
Yes.
It's even a joke how the other two Spider-Men don't know who the Avengers are. There's
that was so good.
Yeah, one of my favorite scenes at the end of the movie, sorry to jump around, but is they're trying to coordinate to fight a bunch of villains, and none of the other Spider-Men are used to working in a team. And so Holland, by virtue of the fact that he is used to working in a team, takes control. It's like, hey guys, I'm going to lead us because I know what a team is like, and it's like I was in the Avengers, and the other guy's like, "Is that a band?" And that was so funny. But yeah,
I saw a meme. I saw a meme earlier. A friend sent it to me. That after he says that, he's like, "No, it's just a team. I know how to get everyone together." And then you see Tobey flip, and he's like, and they say that's Bully Maguire coming up.
Yeah, there are some surprise. There are lots of Tobey. The Tobey Spider-Man movies. They're like super memey. I can just off the top of my head, I can think of like 2 direct references to memes. Like it was really funny when Norman Osborn just like, "Oh, I'm something of a scientist myself." That was one of the original funny memes, and then the other one was the back meme. But I'm sure if you really looked at and you could.
Sorry. Oh yeah. The other one was.
But
Sorry, I broke up.
The back meme where Tobey is complaining about his back, and so he and Andrew have this moment where they're like trying to. Yeah, so it's there are lots of memes. I do think you have a point though, where the movie does try to, because it's still Tom Holland's Spider-Man movie. It's not suddenly. Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield show up and then it's their movie. They really are supporting characters in this whole kind of saga. It really is still, Tom Holland's thing. But the whole crux of this movie is in a lot of ways deconstructing the entire legacy of the MCU Spider-Man, because by the end of the movie, again, spoilers, Aunt May is dead. No one knows that Peter Parker existed because he cost the original version of the spell. And he goes to being a nobody. It's almost in a way, the series is done like a soft reboot, where the trilogy has built up to a high where almost a lot of people felt like, Spider-Man was going to be Tony Stark's successor, and then it ends with Spider-Man going back to being basically a nobody, an unknown hero who's reduced to poverty. He's living in a rubbish apartment. He doesn't have all the money. He doesn't have all the tech. All of that is gone. And so it almost reboots the entire Spider-Man, which is kind of wild when you think about it.
But that suit he sewed at the end for himself is awesome. I love that shiny blue texture. What did you think of the suit that he made for himself?
Oh yeah, it reminds me a lot of like the way you would see Spider-Man in a comic book. Because
yes, exactly.
It's kind of tacky and bright, and that's like, oh yeah, this is kind of what a kid would make if he doesn't have money for like, like a tactical Spider-Man suit or something that's got nano. It's just like shiny fabric, because it has to be stretchy. Because he's
definitely comic and series based.
Yeah, it's very
Spider-Man.
It's a well, the end of the movie takes Spider-Man all the way back to his roots because he's trapped. Yeah.
I think that's what I also like about it, because now Tom Holland signed on for 3 more films, and we're gonna see that. And hopefully, spoiler alert, we don't need to say that in this now. MJ and Ned will remember him.
Yeah, one of the big themes about this whole movie is the theme of sacrifice. Now, anyone who knows anything about Spider-Man knows that Spider-Man deals with sacrifice like on the daily, right? It's not one of the big memes about Spider-Man is this that Uncle Ben has to die, and he has to say the line. He has Uncle Ben just keeps getting killed, and this was actually the moment where I felt like Tom Holland's character, his Peter Parker, kind of lost everything. He didn't just lose his support network and all the money and stuff. He lost Aunt May. He lost all of his friends. Every other kind of thing that just kind of held him together was just removed, and he was at his sort of lowest point. And I do think you're right, because he does have another, technically, I think there's an animated prequel called Spider-Man Freshman Year that's coming to Disney Plus, and there are these 3 more movies to flesh out this whole new thing. Now, do you think that like Tom Holland has kind of earned his Spidey spurs, because he is now, I think, in a lot of ways, a respectable Spider-Man. He can kind of stand toe-to-toe in terms of legacy with the others. And the fans definitely seem to... I in a lot of ways, everyone still likes Tobey Maguire. I think he still is like the most well-regarded Spider-Man. But I feel like a lot of people have really warmed up to Tom Holland and his Spider-Man now that he's actually had to build himself up from nothing again.
Andrew.
If I'm not mistaken, Andrew did do an interview where he said that he was open to playing another Spider-Man.
Yes. It's so exciting. Your question is yes, he's earned that Spider-Man title. And what convinced me in the 3rd film was the showdown at the very end with Norman. The way he hunched over as a spider in that posture, and then Norman's like, "Are you gonna zap me back to my universe so I can die?" He's like, "No, I'm gonna do it myself." And when he did that gaze, I feel like he's not that preppy little, oh my god, do you see that battlefield? Oh my god, there's Captain America from Civil War. Like, he's changed so much, and he's earned it for certain.
Yeah,
like,
I think no, you're right.
He's the youngest brother, because they base it off as brothers, which is really cool. You get the eldest brother, which is Toby. You get the middle brother, which is Andrew. Now you get the youngest brother, which is Tom.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing how well that worked out, because they actually do have that sort of temperament. All 3 of the Spider-Men do have that sort of, oh yeah, Toby's the most mature. He's been through the ringer. In terms of the amount of loss that he's faced, Uncle Ben, Harry, he's lost a lot of people. in terms of his struggle. You know, his whole thing with MJ, and then Garfield, his struggle. One of the nicer moments in the movie, and I'm wondering about this actually, is where MJ, Zendaya, basically, she falls off a ledge, and Tom tries to jump to save her, but he stopped, and so Andrew jumps instead. And anyone who's seen the webverse will know that famously he doesn't in that franchise. That version of Peter fails to save Gwen Stacy when she falls down. He catches her, but doesn't slow her down enough, so she basically breaks her own. I think she breaks her neck. And this time it's almost, that was a moment of redemption. You could see it visibly on his face after he'd done that. That it's, oh yeah, I managed to do it this time. I didn't let her die. Almost in a way he was projecting onto MJ his version of Gwen. It's a lot of moments like that I feel like really tie everything together, because in a way this movie is a send-off for the other two Spider-Men. Because even if there isn't another version of Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man, I think in a way you could almost say that his character arc is a little bit more complete than it was at the end of The Amazing Spider-Man 2, I think.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah,
it was done really well for both of them. It was very touching about but we all predicted it would happen, that he would save MJ to redeem himself. There were so many theories, even about Aunt May dying. But when you see it happen, it's amazing. It's so good, because you feel it too, because you didn't enjoy seeing Gwen die, and seeing his happiness, because MJ, Michelle Jones, didn't know really about what happened to Gwen, so she asked him like naively, like, "Are you okay?"
Yeah,
because she could see he was down.
It was that moment. No, exactly. It was the moment
sweet.
where these characters go beyond simply just an appearance, and they become their own characters in and of themselves. I think it's really interesting that No Way Home actually ended up working, because there are a lot of characters in No Way Home. There are like multiple villains. There's Green Goblin, Sandman, Electro, the Lizard, yeah. And there are lots, and there are other characters. There's Doctor Strange. There's Wong, who's in it briefly. The other Spider-Men. It's a very character-heavy movie. Now, I know that there have been lots of criticisms of previous Spider-Man movies where they kind of front-load everything. I think it was Spider-Man 3 where everything was front-loaded with a lot of characters, and one of the criticisms that was levied against that movie was that there were too many characters in the movie and it just made everything a clutter. How do you feel about the number of characters in this movie? Do you think they actually handled it better? And why do you think that is so?
I think they handled it better because Endgame happened and Infinity War. With those films, they were able to create separate scenes for individual characters as groups and just working through storylines. And I think from that, I think it's the same. Kevin Feige, yeah, he did Endgame, right? He partook in Endgame, right? Yeah. So like, I think he had an idea on what to do instead of like grouping it all together like Sam Raimi did. He was able to just put it all together, and I was, the first time I watched it, I was like, time's running out. Where's Andrew and Toby? They should be here soon. All I've been seeing is the villains and all the other characters. So he managed to do it at the right time, and it wasn't like they didn't have enough screen time. So I saw it with one of my friends. I think it's my third time. The third time I saw it, my friend thought that they were just gonna have like this mini little appearance for like 5 or 10
Oh yeah,
minutes.
like right at the end, and they show up and it's like, hey guys, I'm the other spider guy. And then
yes,
yeah, but they didn't do that.
And they had so much more screen time, and I loved that. And they even got to say goodbye, and it was just done so well. And I don't think it was all too much at once. I think that's why it's also great, because it didn't feel like what's going on, what's happening. Like, the story was well panned out, and it had a conclusion, and it's just worth the watch beginning to end. Like, you understand everything that is going on, and yeah, okay, I'll be honest, Happy didn't have enough screen time. It was a bit random, like when he calls Tom and he's like, Hey, I see that there are some guys entering my building. There's some robots with robot legs. Don't like what's going on there? And then next thing you know, he arrives there, and that's when May dies. But it's like, then you see him right at the end, and it's like, did you know her? You know.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. I think for me, the reason why they managed to get away with having the number of characters that they do, and they have like weighty characters, right? It's not just like you said, it's not just a brief appearance of a Spider-Man. It's actually serious integration of these Spider-Men into the plot. I think the reason why they get away with this is because the MCU has proven, by virtue of the fact that they have a shared universe, that characters can exist in these big nebulous spaces. So they can have Doctor Strange show up in this movie, drive the plot in a number of major ways, do some on-screen
Yep.
stuff, have some action scenes, and then just disappear because they know that he'll have his own movie later down the line, and they don't need to do everything like what they might have needed to do in the Raimi movie. They can
You're
defer
right.
other things because yeah, Doctor Strange does play a big role in this movie, um, but he doesn't need to do any. He doesn't need. Basically, he can do whatever he just needs to, and then the fans will know that he will be in other movies. You know, the one thing that Marvel has really changed with the MCU is they, for the first time, really have created that kind of shared universe where it does actually feel like characters can appear in different movies and just show up and do stuff and then go away because you know that they'll be in other stuff. They don't have to do everything. You know, it's not like Doctor Strange needed to have a character arc, you know, in this movie. But
Mm.
without the MCU, without this shared universe that they're all in, without this idea that, oh yeah, there will be a Doctor Strange movie, there will be more, you know, just products, you know, media in this space, I think that would have been the death knell because then it would have been, oh yeah, Doctor Strange has to have an arc, Ned has to have an arc, you know, because we don't know if these people are going to be in other properties, you know. But with the MCU, you have this unique ability to um, to do stuff that you wouldn't be able to do. Like you know, props to Sam Raimi for trying to do what he tried to do, but I really don't think they had the capacity to do this kind of movie all the way back then. Um, you know, just because it isn't a shared universe in that kind of way. It was its own self-contained thing, and you know, they didn't have the kind of space that the MCU does. Whereas now there's a movie for Venom. You know, there's probably going to be a movie with Carnage and all the other characters will get their moment and they'll get their space and so on and so forth. You know?
Yes.
Yeah.
I still need to watch Venom 2. I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, you know, that's kind of funny because Venom is one of the. Whenever I think of Spider-Man, I think of Venom, but it has taken a very long time for Venom to actually be introduced and made into a character who could appear in, you know, a mainline MCU Spider-Man property.
But I don't think Tom Hardy will be the Venom in this universe because we saw that there was some black goo left behind.
Yeah, in the after credits sequence. So there
Yes.
is the potential for a Venom, but not the Hardy Venom, because he is in his he's in his own universe doing his own thing.
I wonder if we'll have a multiverse of Venoms. No, we've only had. No, we have. We've had Perfect Grace from Spider-Man 3, and now we've got Eddie. Well, Eddie. Tom Hardy. And now there's gonna be an upcoming one. Maybe it's gonna be Ned. I don't know.
Well, in the Ned is if I remember my Spider-Man lore correctly, Ned is actually the Hobgoblin in the comics.
I've heard that before.
Yeah, he's actually. I mean, he's not like the Hobgoblin. He is apparently, you know, mind control or something, but he is the Hobgoblin in the comics to some extent. So maybe that's something that they might do there. I have no idea. I think we're kind of in a weird space with Spider-Man because Spider-Man is a property that is big enough to contain a lot. You know, if I had to redo the MCU from beginning, right? I think I would actually probably start with Spider-Man. I think I would, instead of doing it around Iron Man like they did with, you know, our timeline. I think I would actually start everything with Spider-Man because Spider-Man is big enough that I feel like you could do a lot of stuff there and then expand it further.
You also say this, and then there's the end of the film where you saw a lot of the villains coming through. We saw Black Cat, we saw Rhino. What's that villain with the lion fur?
Craven the Hunter.
Yes. And then there was someone else, but I can't remember who.
Yeah,
There was a bunch of
there is
villains.
a possibility. There is this possibility that there will be um, a lot more, interactions, in the Spider Verse that is forming. And speaking of, I think this is definitely something we have to talk about. Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse also did something very similar, where they brought in a bunch of Spider-Men, to contextualize the journey of another Spider-Man, Miles Morales in this case. How do you feel those two movies compare to one another? This movie and that?
No Way Home and Spider-Verse.
Yeah.
Okay, so I feel like Spider-Verse was animated really well when it came to the multiverse. I really enjoyed that animation style and the music. It's completely different in that regard. I feel that a lot more can be done with Spider-Verse. Not that it's a bad thing. I just feel it has a lot more potential. No Way Home did what it needed to do when it came to the multiverse. They opened it well. Loki opened the multiverse. And then they may have seen the multiverse open. So that was just the opening of it, and then we dealt with all the characters. But I feel Spider-Verse isn't completed yet when it comes to that, and it's true because there's gonna be 2 parts coming out of the sequel, which I'm looking forward to. I just wonder, when it came to bringing up Miles in No Way Home, they only said like when Max spoke to Andrew's Peter, he was like, "I was just hoping you were black." I wonder if there's a black Spider-Man out there. And then, yeah, we all think Miles, but that's about it that we got from that, which is a little disappointing, but I'm not too phased because maybe they'll bring them together in future.
Yeah, I think No, you're right. I think that the big difference between Spider-Verse and No Way Home is that No Way Home is the end of a trilogy. So really, you have to, and it's not just that, it's the end of really an era of Spider-Man. It's the era of the first 2 Spider-Man movies. But Spider-Verse is on the cusp of something totally new. And the Miles Morales Spider-Man is really just getting into his own as a Spider-Man and developing his own, his sense of identity. It's also important that, like, the Spider-Men that they brought into the Spider-Verse movie were not well-known. It's not like the Spider-Men in that movie were stand-ins for, like, Andrew Garfield and, Tobey Maguire. That's not what happened, right? They were completely different Spider people, and so I think that these movies are comparable in the sense that they are both big-budget collaborations with Spider-Man and, like, huge, bringing together of, like, the fandom, but they are thematically very different. And I feel like we're only just looking at the cusp of what the Spider-Verse, timeline will be. And also, I guess the other thing is, by virtue of the fact that it's animated, they can do crazy stuff in Spider-Verse.
Yeah. Definitely.
One of my favorite things about it is this, that visually it's just a feast. You get to see so many interesting things. You can see different animation styles, different art styles, different art directions even. You have different Spider people who are like, you've got the film noir Spider-Man, you've got the anime Spider-Girl, Penny, Spider-Pig, Spider-Ham. You could do all those kinds of things.
Spider.
Yeah, you could do all those kinds of things.
And Spider-Gwen.
Oh yeah, and Spider-Gwen. She's also going to play a prominent role in the new Spider-Man movie. So it's like Spider-Verse movie. So it's like you could do a lot of stuff with Spider-Verse, but on the other hand, maybe this is my own personal bias, but I feel like these live-action movies feel a little bit more grounded. It just feels more. It feels more personable, because when you look at, you can see someone's sadness a little bit. I don't know, just for me, when I look at some, if you when the moment that Aunt May died, and you saw Toby, not Toby, you saw Tom just utterly destroyed, and you could see that look of despair on his face, and you see that look again when he's about to kill the Green Goblin. It's transformed into rage. This is like super relatable, and I don't know, you can have really good animation, but I still think there's something special, about actual actors doing the actual, emoting and stuff. Maybe that's just me.
So there's an example. So like when Max in his Electro form says to Andrews Peter like, "You ain't the shit no more." Peter, Andrews Peter is like, "Yeah, I know," and he was in his full suit, but the way he hunched over, like, I love that he acts out while he's in his spider outfit, and that's exactly what you were talking about now. Like that, like real life can still pull off emotion compared to animation. Like, no hate against animation. I love animation. It's just that's what makes No Way Home. It's another reason why it's worth going back to watching again and again, because you get to see all those emotions portrayed very well.
Exactly. I think these two things have their space, right? I think that it's not that they aren't emotive or anything like that. They are, right? There are lots of tragic moments in Spider-Verse, but it's just that it's easier to relate to a person on screen when you can see their face. And it's that kind of thing, you know. I do.
Sorry to interrupt. Especially the MJ, Andrew Peter part. Like, yeah, it's like let's backtrack to that again. It's like the way you could tell, like you'd be able to read him. Like you wouldn't even had to have watched Amazing Spider-Man 2 to understand that he's relieved and he's still feeling pain, but he's also very happy that he has redeemed himself. You can read all that like within that scene.
Yeah, exactly. You can do that, and I think that when it comes to the way that Spider-Verse handled its characters, I kind of felt like it was really just Miles and Peter B. Parker. Really, they were just, and maybe Gwen, they were really the only spider people that were really characterized. I felt like the other, maybe that was too crowded, you know, in a way. That was way too crowded. But I do think that by keeping it to just Toby and Andrew and Tom, they were able to bring, and it's like you said, they have that whole big brother, little brother, middle brother dynamic, and that's a good dynamic, right? It almost feels natural when the three of them are on stage together. It feels like, hey, these guys are actually working off a dynamic that's real. Whereas Miles is not really there yet, I think, in terms of that dynamic that he had, you know. But he'll get there. I have no doubt. You know, I'm very excited to see what they do with Spider-Verse. But I do think it is kind of another, another difference.
There's a possibility, it only hit me now that Andrew and Toby are released, they're introduced in the MCU universe, they might mayhaps make an appearance in the Spider-Verse.
Yeah,
now it won't be out of nowhere. With Tom, like all three of them, like just like showing up, even if it's briefly.
Yeah, no, you're totally right. I think that it is possible that they bring those guys into, Spider-Man movies. I do think that if they wanted to continue to tell those kinds of stories with Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield, I think doing it in animation would probably be the better way to go, because it would probably be cheaper than a live action. And maybe they could do like a series.
They can just lend their voices.
Yeah, they could just lend their voices. They can. It doesn't have to be like a big budget, break the bank kind of animation. That could actually, now that I think about it, I think I really would like to see maybe one or two more instances of Tobey Maguire, because it would be really interesting to see a very old Spider-Man. My personal favorite Batman is the Batman from The Dark Knight Returns, which is a comic book where he fights Superman, and it's a whole thing. And he's an old man, and he's deeply disgruntled, and it's interesting to see it's interesting to see the weight of the years, on him. Just like how I actually do like Ben Affleck's Batman a lot. Probably unpopular opinion, everyone loves Christian Bale, probably rightfully so. But I do feel like it would be cool to see an old character, an old Spider-Man do Spider-Man stuff, and also Andrew Garfield is like 38, so it's not exactly like he's a spring chicken either. He's still pretty good looking for 38. Yeah.
Sorry, like Robert Downey Jr. as Tony Stark. Like he's so much older than both of those elders, and he did really well. And I think Benedict Cumberbatch is also older than those Spider-Man. Like you have a lot of aged MCU characters that's not really looked over. Like Toby and Andrew are still a lot younger compared to the other Marvel characters. I think Tom Hiddleston is 42. He's in between Andrew and Toby's age.
Oh yeah, well I guess that's true as well. There aren't really too many young characters, which is maybe another reason why No Way Home stands out a little bit more, because Ned and Zendaya are also young characters, and they do kind of have a thing, that is in terms of the story.
You know what? Like I think all three of them, Tom, Zendaya, and Jacob, I think they're all 23 or 25. If you can possibly Google that somehow quickly, just to confirm their ages. They're the same age. I think I looked it up the other day, which is very cool.
Yeah, Zendaya is 25.
And
And the actor that plays Ned is... that's Jacob Batalon, I think. Right? That's his name?
Yes.
Yeah, he was born in 1996, so he's 27. No?
Isn't he 25?
No, sorry, no, he's 24.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And then Tom Holland?
Tom Holland is probably 25. Yeah, he's 25. He looks pretty good for 25. I will say.
How cool is that? So it's like a similar age group, and they have a lot going for them, for sure.
Yeah, I think there is this idea maybe that's floating around a little bit that maybe there could be like additional stuff with these characters. Maybe Ned could become a sorcerer because they gave him magic. That could be something that's very interesting.
Dude, I got Doctor Strange magic.
Yeah. The funny thing is, it contrasts quite a lot, because when Strange was learning magic, the fact that he was a medical doctor for so many years, is like, oh, he has to like unlearn his biases. But Ned, who's just he's just a nerd who doesn't have any sort of assumptions about what magic is or isn't like, could just use it. And I thought that was an interesting sort of moment where it's like, oh yeah, if you don't know, if you don't have these preconceptions, because you're a younger person, the world is your oyster. You can just use magic in that kind of way. And I thought that was a cool moment. I did want to pick your brain about one last thing, I think, before we start to close out the episode, and that is, of course, the central villain of No Way Home. That is the Green Goblin, right? Do you agree with me that the Green Goblin is the central villain?
Yes.
What did you think?
Well, because he didn't turn against, but like, I think he excelled at his role, Willem Dafoe. Like, we didn't expect that. None of us did. Like, we thought he was gonna redeem himself, like Octavius. And okay, well, Max was at ends about it. He's like, I don't like how this feels. And then Sandman was like, well, let's just do it. We're gonna be back to our normal selves. But then that's some neat trick. It says Green Goblin, and then Doc Ock is like, Norman, and he's like, Norman's on sabbatical, honey.
Yeah,
well, it was so good.
Norman is he's a great actor. He's incredibly expressive.
Yes.
Just, we were talking about expressive faces. Like, he is very expressive.
Yeah.
And he brings a lot of emotion. It's like you can tell on his face when he's Norman Osborn and when he's the Green Goblin, just by looking at his facial expressions, just looking at the way that he comports his eyes, the way that he talks, I thought it was a very interesting decision to centralize the villain of this story as the Green Goblin, because, as you brought up in the beginning, the consequence of all of this is Quentin Beck. It's Mysterio, right? So we're still living in Mysterio's shadow. And in a way, by erasing everyone's memory of Spider-Man, he kind of wins. Mysterio kind of wins, in terms of what he wanted to do, although of course he's not alive to see it. But using the Green Goblin, I think he's way more menacing. he's way more violent, he's way more crazy, you know? And this allows him as a character to contrast with Tom Holland's Spider-Man, who is very much not used to fighting a villain like the Green Goblin, right? If you think about the people that he was fighting up previously, they're kind of larger than life in a way. You know, you've had Thanos and Mysterio and stuff like that, but the Green Goblin is just an utterly, you know, there was a moment, you know, where I felt like, oh yeah, he's totally just gonna let himself die so that he can do something terrible to Peter Parker because he's that far gone, you know. Whereas for the other, you know, I don't think Mysterio wanted to die. I don't think that, the Vulture wanted to die or anything like that. In fact, these people are very much more grounded. But the Green Goblin, he's just so different. You know, he's so out there, and it's cool. I love to see it. I thought he was a great.
I'm really glad we got to deal with him as a villain again, and I also feel that each villain had such similar fighting scenes to their respected films. You got Doc Ock action like you would in Spider-Man 2. You got your Electro action you would get in Amazing Spider-Man 2. Hell, they even used this music that was composed by Hans Zimmerman and Pharrell Williams and another composer. I really like how they portrayed the villains, but yes, Green Goblin stole the limelight with this one, for sure, and I'm not upset at all. I think it was very good. I just wonder, like, why didn't they bring Vulture and Mysterio back?
Well, Mysterio, I think they had to keep Mysterio out of it because the point of the whole thing was that he had died, to basically get the bit to kickstart the entire movie. The Vulture, I think that was an interesting plot because, he knows who Spider-Man is. So if you think about, oh, wait a minute, who are all the people who know who Spider-Man is? But maybe they're saving him for later use. You know, maybe they're saving him for later use because they had like a bunch of villains, they had a bunch of heroes. Maybe they just found the right balance. They found the perfect balance between the number of characters that were in the movie and the potential for other characters later, you know?
I see that he's in the Morbius trailer.
Huh. You're
but
right.
I think this is before his events as Vulture. I'm not sure. Is it afterwards? I don't know if it takes place after or before.
I think we'll have to leave that one for speculation. There's a lot of Marvel, stuff that's coming out, and we'll just have to see where they go with it. I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I enjoyed the movie quite a lot. It's not like my favorite movie was of recent times is Dune, but that's a very different movie to No Way Home. I think like of the Marvel movies that I've seen recently, No Way Home is definitely the best. But yes. I will reserve my judgment until I see the Doctor Strange one, because Doctor Strange is probably my favorite MCU character.
That's awesome.
Yeah, okay. He's the one character that I think I most identify with.
All right. Yeah, and the trailer looked so good. And seeing it at the end of the film is so worth the wait. It's just weird now because they've released the trailer, so it's like, what's the point in staying in the after credits?
Yeah, that's true. But you know what? I think it's all coming out. We're all very spoiled. We're all very lucky that the Spider-Man movies are more or less pretty good. They do have a couple of missteps here and there, but for the most part, they are very good. Any final thoughts before we end off?
Well, I also enjoyed the soundtrack. The soundtrack was really good because they incorporated their music from Spider-Man trilogy and Amazing Spider-Man 1 and 2, and you could hear it. And I loved it, and they put Tom Holland's music in there too. But then there's also the Magic Number by De La Soul, which isn't really on Spotify at the moment. You have to go on YouTube to listen to this. But it's really good, and I'm glad that they put it in for the end credits.
You're a little bit your ear is a little bit more keen than mine, because I'm not sure I heard But then again, I didn't watch the movie as many times. So maybe that's an argument for watching it many times. There's so many things that you'll probably not pick everything up on the first watch.
Well, like after I watched it the first time, I loved that song so much that I looked it up immediately. So now, whenever I watch the movie, I just really enjoy it because now I know the lyrics a lot better too,
Okay.
and it's enjoyable.
Yeah. Yeah, so this brings to a close, I think, the first episode of our Spider-Man mini-series. I think the next episode, we're going to be discussing Spider-Man as a working-class hero, which I'm really looking forward to, because I feel like that is the core of part of why he's so relatable. But before we go, would you like to shout anything out?
Yes, I have a TikTok page and an Instagram page, and it's its underscore Robzy, ROBZY. No full caps, it's all small letters.
Yes.
And
all of these links will be included in the description.
Yeah, so like my TikTok page is very close to 21k followers and nearing it's at 3.9, so it's very close to 4 million likes. So I'm very proud of that, and yeah, feel free to support me. It's full of Spidey edits.
Yeah, I think that you should definitely watch this TikTok if you like really funny Spider-Man, TikToks. I didn't necessarily know there was quite a market for it, but given how many followers you actually have, I feel like that's a good thing.
It's grown from. Oh, you're welcome. Sorry, it's grown from 8,000. Thanks to all the Spider-Man edits, I gained 13,000 new followers.
Well, it's your hard work that actually does it. And so that brings us to a close. Thank you very much for checking out Bite Marks. We hope that you enjoyed our Spider-Man episode. We hope that you will join us for more Spider-Man episodes. Take care and good night, everybody. Be safe.
Bye.